Welcome to the Center for Service and Community Engagement Service Placement Site Expectations presentation. This presentation provides important guidelines that will enable you to be successful at your service placement site. We will cover commitment, professionalism and liability, communication, and cultural competence. So let's start at commitment. First, it's important to make service a top priority. This means being on time and prepared. Do not leave your placement site until you are scheduled to do so. If you know in advance that you will miss a session, let the appropriate staff know via email. If you will be late or absent, call and leave a message for the placement site staff before 8 a.m. in the morning. It's also important to be of service. Recognize that your organization exists to fulfill its mission by addressing the needs of the clients. Demonstrate an attitude of appreciation for the opportunity to learn and serve rather than an expectation that you will be served. Most importantly, be helpful. It's also important to be present. Acknowledge that your energy level that you bring to your service site will be recognized by those who you work with. So make sure that you get a full night of sleep beforehand and that you're well fed and that you just come with a good amount of energy to connect, especially with the youth and children will be able to pick up on your energy. It's important that you're knowledgeable about the organization that you will be serving with. Go online and look around, look at their mission, their core values, and the history of the organization. A lot of our organizations have really interesting history to the founding of the organization, and that will help in your ability to serve better and also in your connection back to your coursework. It's important to be flexible. Although we ask our service learners to be very consistent with their schedules, the schools and organizations cannot always promise the same in return. Occasionally, sessions are disrupted because of a field trip, last-minute meetings, absent clients. If your session has been disrupted, ask a staff member if there are other tasks to be completed, or if there are clients that need assistance. However, if you are consistently asked to complete tasks other than those detailed in your service learning description, discuss this with your site supervisor. Recognize that change takes time. The issues addressed by your service agency are not simple or without historical context. Our world is composed of complex systems that interact with and affect one another. Recognize that the work you and your agency are committed to will make an impact, but may not provide the final solution. Your contributions are very valuable. It is worthwhile to learn about the issues addressed by your service site. A fuller understanding will provide clarity related to your service and your coursework. Next, we'll move on to professionalism and liability. So here is a slide that has a bunch of words that represent the Seattle University mission and some of our core values. It's important that you maintain behaviors consistent with Seattle University's values and mission. Demonstrate maturity and an integrated sense of self through respectful and appropriate behavior both on and off campus. Recognize that what you choose to say and do reflects directly on the organizations you represent, as well as Seattle University. Be accountable for your actions, whether or not the outcomes were attended. Next, we have a couple slides that address boundaries. So this first one is a scenario that we ask of the class that we're doing this presentation for, and it says, you've been working with a 7th grade student consistently for the past few weeks. Today, as you are leaving the school, the student asks to be friends on Facebook. What do you do? So we, as the Center for Service and Community Engagement, ask that you avoid giving personal contact information, and this includes Facebook, your address, your phone number, your email, to youth and adults with whom you work. And this is just so you can maintain professional boundaries during the time that you are serving the youth or the clients. So this is, even though this example is of a 7th grader, this will happen also for adults that you're serving with. We also ask that you do not borrow or lend money to others at your placement site, and this is another professional boundary. Another issue with Facebook is that a lot of people post pictures of their time on service, so we really ask that you're aware that there are no youth or clients in the photos that you post, or just to not post photos of your time with service, to be aware of the confidentiality of the people that you're working with. We ask that you do not text or take personal phone calls during your service hours. So this graph actually shows that a lot of people use their cell phone for checking the time. And we ask that potentially you might wear a watch or just be aware of the clock in the room. But checking the time on the phone can look like you're reading a text message or being distracted and not present with the people you're working with. Understanding policies, procedures, and rules. So it's your responsibility to know the specific policies and procedures at your service site. Most likely this will be covered in your first day orientation, but a lot of our organizations don't do an orientation. They might quickly show you around and then you might start your service right away. So it's up to you to kind of ask questions of, where can I find the restrooms? Are the restrooms different for staff and students or clients? Where can I store my personal belongings? Discuss safety procedures, ask about very specific policies such as confidentiality at your site. So this is really important that you understand how your site functions and the policies that your site addresses. It's important to log your hours, and we actually ask that you log your hours in 3 different ways, and I know it can be tedious, but first we ask that you keep a personal log of your hours, so just in the back of your notebook or course book. Next is we ask that you record your hours on eServe, and this is done towards the end of your quarter. You'll log on to eServe, and eServe is where you sign up for a course or a placement, and where you'll do your evaluation. But 2 weeks before the quarter ends, you'll go and you'll record your hours, and then your site supervisor will confirm your hours and sign off, and this is actually how you get credit for the service that you've done. And then it's also important that a lot of our organizations have a check-in, a sign-in sheet where you're also recording your hours, and this is important because our organizations use these hours for grant funding, grant matching, donor money. So to record your hours in those 3 areas is important. It's important to dress appropriately. So this looks different at different service sites, but you can always ask, what should I wear? How should I be dressed? Another good tip is just to look what your site supervisor is wearing day in, day out, to not wear anything that has disturbing graphics or vocabulary words on it, to make sure you're wearing comfortable shoes, especially if you're running around a lot with little kids or walking to and from your site. And so again, just ask your site supervisor if you have any questions about dressing appropriately. Next, there's specific things that will guard against circumstances that would incur your liability. So one of these is to always work with youth and clients in an open area and never behind closed doors, or with at least another staff member or volunteer present. So never be one-on-one with a youth or a client. Also, never go off-site with your youth or clients or give them a ride in a personal vehicle. This would incur you being one-on-one with them and also in a place that might be unsafe for the youth or clients and yourself. So there's a couple other scenarios that talk about liability. The one in the green to the left, you're volunteering at a local soup kitchen when you notice 2 people in line begin to argue. One gets very angry and aggressive. Staff members are preoccupied and have not noticed the ensuing conflict. What do you do? So we ask that you just don't get in the way of this, that you don't insert yourself in the middle of this argument, that you go and right away ask a site supervisor or staff member, even if they're preoccupied, and let them know what's happening and let them. They are trained and they are liable to deal with this, not you. The next scenario to the right in yellow says you arrive at an elementary school and you've been volunteering at for the past few weeks. And the boy you've been working with rushes to greet you with a big hug. You don't want to be rude, but you know hugs aren't allowed. What do you do? So this is very common in our K-12 public schools, of personal space between an appropriate touch between staff and volunteers and youth and children. And so a lot of our schools don't allow hugs. One of our recommendations is side hugs, shoulder hugs. You get down to the space of the children and do a shoulder hug, pats on the shoulder or back, secret handshake that you've developed with the kids you work with, high fives. verbal praises. All of these things can be used in place of hugs to just show also positive affirmation. So traveling to and from your site, we often ask, we show this picture to the classrooms and we ask the students, how is this woman not traveling appropriately to her site? Let's say she's walking from Seattle University to her site and has 10 blocks to walk. Often students say she's holding her iPhone or iPad out in the open. She's listening to music, so she's distracted. She looks like she's looking down. Sunglasses. She's not aware of her surroundings. Some people say her her purse is just on one shoulder rather than across her chest. So there's lots of ways that to use caution and common sense when traveling to and from your site. Keep your head up, look confident, and walk purposefully. Headphones and hoods may make you an easy target, especially if you're not aware of your surroundings. And for evening shifts, especially for winter quarter, consider traveling to and from your site with a service learning buddy. And you can always contact the Center for Service if you would like to know of other students that are working at your site, but they may be in other classes, and we can match you with the same time so you have someone to walk to and from Seattle U and your site with. So next we're going to move on to communication. So first, as we've kind of been mentioning through this presentation, it's important that you ask questions. There's no bad question, just keep asking questions. Some of the things you'll want to ask is, what's the culture of communication? How should you communicate with your site supervisor? Are they best to communicate via phone or their cell phone if they're out and about? Let's say they're at a community garden and they're really not in their office a lot. Or email. Also ask, how else can I help? Say, if I get done with my tasks for today, what else needs to be done? Can you please clarify? I don't understand. I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. If you're not here, who else should be my backup site supervisor? All those questions, hopefully you can ask on the first day, but continue to ask questions throughout the quarter. So these are some first day tips, what you'll want to do. Some of the stuff will be covered via email, but it's important that you verbally do this in person when you meet your site supervisor for the first day. So introduce yourself, say your name, what class you're from, if you're new to the Seattle area, if you're familiar, so they can, if you have other questions about kind of where your site is. Also say you're from Seattle University. A lot of our organizations work with students from other universities and community colleges, so just remind them that you're from Seattle University. Confirm your dates and your times. Let them know when you're going to be there and the time. Ask what expectations they have of you as a volunteer, and also you can express what expectations you have as them as a site supervisor. What do you want to learn out of this experience? Exchange contact information, so hopefully that's done via email beforehand, but again, if you need a cell phone number or a phone number. And then how you will be informed of your daily tasks. Will the site supervisor let you know? Will there be a book that records the things that need to be done that day? So all this stuff should be covered on your first day. It's really important that if you are experiencing any difficulties at your site, that you first contact your site supervisor and let them know as soon as you're experiencing any conflicts or questions or difficulties. And if it's an issue between your site supervisor and you, then you come to the Center for Service and Community Engagement. Or if things are not being addressed by your site supervisor, please come to the Center for Service and Community Engagement and let us know what the issue is. We're here to help you and support you. We mentioned this a little bit, but it's important to be aware of your site's confidentiality policy. So this especially comes into play if you are reflecting verbally in class or in a reflection notebook or through a paper, that you don't use the names of individuals that you're working with. So pick pseudonyms for them just so they can't be identified. It's also, this happens for a lot of our students, that you will see or bump into your either staff members or recipients of service in the Capitol Hill, Seattle downtown area. And we ask that you do not approach those people for their own confidentiality and privacy. If they approach you, a person you've been working with approaches you and says, hey, then you can engage in conversation. But please do not say, hey, I recognize you from the soup bank or the soup kitchen, and approach them. Wait until they approach you. So So you have another scenario. It says you are working with a young man who is a junior in high school, serving as a mentor and tutor. One day you notice that the young man has a number of large bruises on his arms. When you ask about the bruises, he states that he fell off his bike. He became withdrawn and uncomfortable, and quickly changes the subject. You suspect he might be involved in a possible abuse situation, but aren't sure. What do you do? So we ask here, again, that you contact your site supervisor about this, even if there's a suspicion, because it's possible that other people have reported or other people have had a suspicion and haven't reported. And so it's important they have more full information about the student and the situation, so just let them know you have a suspicion. And then second, you need to let someone in the Center for Service and Community Engagement know also. So there's 2 places you need to report, even if it's a suspicion. One is to your site supervisor, and then to the Center for Service and Community Engagement. And this is to protect our children in the community. So next we'll move on to cultural competence. So cultural competence refers to the process by which individuals and systems respond respectively and effectively to people of all cultures, languages, classes, races, ethnic backgrounds, religions, and other diversity factors in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values the worth of individuals, families, and communities, and protects and preserves the dignity of each. Large definition, but that's the definition of cultural competence. It's a way of thinking, relating, and connecting to others and being in the world. So we're all on spectrums of becoming more culturally aware and maybe are never quite at the place of competence, but we're always growing and there's always room for growth. And we hope that through your engagement at your service site, you're engaging with new stories, new cultural backgrounds, either with volunteers or participants that you're working alongside with. So I'm going to show a TED Talk, and this is Chimamanda Adichie, and the TED Talk is called The Danger of a Single Story, and we're only going to watch a couple minutes of it. Chimamanda Adichie is a Nigerian storyteller, and I'm just going to start it.
When I learned some years ago that writers were expected to have had really unhappy childhoods to be successful, I began to think about how I could invent horrible things my parents had done to me. But the truth is that I had a very happy childhood, full of laughter and love, in a very close-knit family. But I also had grandfathers who died in refugee camps. My cousin, Polly, died because he could not get adequate health care. One of my closest friends, Okoloma, died in a plane crash because our fire trucks did not have water. I grew up under repressive military governments that devalued education so that sometimes my parents were not paid their salaries. And so as a child, I saw jam disappear from the breakfast table. Then margarine disappeared. Then bread became too expensive. Then milk became rationed. And most of all, a kind of normalized political fear invaded our lives. All of these stories make me who I am. But to insist on only these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that formed me. The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. Of course, Africa is a continent full of catastrophes, the immense ones, such as the horrific rapes in Congo, and depressing ones, such as the fact that 5,000 people apply for one job vacancy in Nigeria. But there are other stories that are not about catastrophe, and it is very important, it is just as important to talk about them. I've always felt that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. The consequence of the single story is this: it robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than how we are similar. So what if...
So we show this to our service learning classes, and we often ask, how does this connect to service learning and cultural competence? And some of the points that why we show this to our classes is that 10 weeks is a really short time to engage with a community or mentor or tutor, or be with a group of people. And it's basically impossible within 10 weeks to get the whole place and story of a person or of an organization. And so we just ask that you acknowledge and recognize that there are incomplete stories that you will engage with, but to be aware that that you're not forming judgment or stereotypes around these incomplete stories, that you question the spaces that are unknown of the stories of individuals and of communities, and you kind of stay open-minded and bring those questions back into the classroom space, but to really be aware of when you might be forming a single story about a situation or a person, and to kind of step back and recognize when you're forming a single story, and remember that there's a much broader place and story and situation to the things that we encounter in our service learning sites. So next, cultural competence is about self-awareness. So this is a lot is returning. We are engaging with others, but as we engage in others, we reflect a lot internally. All successful relationships begin with knowing and understanding yourself, recognizing your unique cultural lens, and questioning your assumptions. Each of us views the world through a unique lens. Our lenses develop over time as a result of our environments and our experiences with race, gender, sexual orientation, class, religion, and ability. We develop prejudices, assumptions through the lens which shape our opinions, decisions, actions, reactions, interactions, judgment, and what we consider normal. Our lenses can become barriers in building trusting relationships. Therefore, it is critical to continually challenge our assumptions about others. So here you just saw just some examples of everything that influences our cultural lens. How we perceive body language, time, do we come from individualistic or collectivist backgrounds, notions of family systems, competition, success, and there's so much more. And then through our cultural lens, we form beliefs. It influences how we interact with other people. It influences our fears, the decisions we make, and the assumptions that we make. So practicing our self-awareness also helps us practice when we might be labeling a group of people. And this happens even at our organizations, might use some of these words that you see on the screen, might use low income, underprivileged. But the further away we get from an individual's name, the more chance there is for labeling or stereotyping to form. And yes, we do need words to describe larger groups of people, but just to be aware of the words that you're using and to mimic the organization, the vocabulary that they use. So do they use client? Do they use participant? Who do they call the population that they serve? And to ask them and to learn a lot about different vocabulary through your organization. So last, it's important to strive and learn and grow with others. So creating inclusive communities by respecting and promoting the dignity of all persons. This means seeking out people from diverse perspectives and backgrounds and actively including people who are marginalized. So this might happen both at your service site and in your classroom. It's important to validate other cultures and identities, engage in dialogue about different issues, and be intentional about listening to what others have to say. Create and maintain an atmosphere that supports success for all people with and for whom you serve. So a lot of what at your service site and in your class, you'll be reflecting, you'll be talking to people from different backgrounds, and just remember how important it is to grow with others and to really take in and listen to other people's opinions that may be different from your own. So that was all for each of our cultural competence, commitment, professionalism, and communication. So now we're going to go into some of the logistical next steps so that you are ready to serve at your organization. So I'm going to briefly talk about eServe, background checks, and how many hours you need to serve, which is 18 hours over the span of the quarter. It's very important that you don't front load or back load these 18 hours. A lot of our organizations rely on a consistent commitment of 2 to 3 hours each week. It may be possible that you're gone a week or that they're gone, so there might be some weeks that you're doing more service, maybe 4 to 5 hours, but make sure to look at your calendar for the quarter and go over this with your site supervisor when you first meet if you're concerned about missing a couple weeks within your quarter. And you're always welcome to go above 18 hours if that's a need and desire of you and the organization as well. Next is background checks. If you are working with an organization that works with youth, which is 18 years and younger, then you will need to complete a background check for Seattle University. Most likely you will also need to complete a background check for the organization as well. So sometimes you might be doing this 2 times. Once you sign up on eServe, which is where you'll sign up for your site, and you're serving at one of these organizations that serves with children and teenagers, it will prompt you to click on things agreement form to send you a background check, and then you will electronically get a background check in your inbox. Please complete this information as soon as you get it and send it back. And we are just going to trust that that you do your background check, but you can start as soon as you put in your information, and we will get in touch with you if there's an issue. If you have any concerns about a background check from your own status or own history, please let us know. We have sites which you do not need to do a background check and have alternative options for you if you're concerned about background checks. Finally is eServe, and if you actually go on our website, which is right here, Center for Service and Community Engagement, and then you click on the students aspect or tab, and then you'll go down, and this isn't a live site, but you'll go down to service learning, academic service learning, and on that page there'll actually be another video that walks you through how to sign up on eServe. Also on our home page there's a link directly to eServe that will take you, and there you will search through the organizations that have been matched for your class. You'll find an organization that looks interesting and works with your schedule, and then you'll call the organization and say, I'm a Seattle University student, I'm from this class, I'd like to serve, or send them an email. Once you get confirmation, then you go back on eServe and you sign up, and that means you hit submit, you fill out initial risk and liability form, and you do background check if it's required. And then you should be signed up for your site, and then you can start your service. So if you have any questions, here is our phone number and our email. And then we're in the Douglas building, the Douglas Residence Buildings, which is on 12th and 13th. It's on your way to the athletic building. So if you have any questions, just stop in. We have a lot of students that just pop in with questions. We're more than willing to help you in person or by phone or by email. All right, thank you and enjoy your service.